During the Three Kingdoms period of ancient Korean history, three rival kingdoms, Baekje, Shilla, the Kaya Confederation, which is not considered one of the three kingdoms, and Goguryeo, dominated the Korean peninsula for hundreds of years, and constantly vied with each other for supremacy through political and military means. Alliances frequently changed between these states, Imperial Chinese dynasties to the west, and the Japanese Kingdom of Wa to the southeast, maintaining an unusually long and hostile, delicate balance of power in the region. In Korea's far ancient past, the peninsula was split between Kujoseon in the north and the Jin Confederacy of small city-states and fortified towns in the south. These both fell apart in the late 2nd century BC due to internal infighting and invasions by the Han Chinese. During the 1st century BC, sometimes called the Proto-Three Kingdoms period, the Samhan Confederations, meaning the Great Three, formed in the south: Mahan, Beohan, and Jinhan. Mahan was the largest and most developed of these, and formed out of a coalition of 54 city-states, while Beohan and Jinhan each formed from 12 small states. Baekje and Shilla first formed as member kingdoms of the Samhan Confederations. To their north, many more independent city-states, tribes, and other large coalitions formed as well. The first of these to form a formidable centralized state was the Kingdom of Buyeo, and after an internal power struggle, one of its princes fled southwards and began uniting the tribes of the north, and established the Kingdom of Goguryeo. The families of allied and conquered tribal chieftains intermarried and were absorbed by Goguryeo royal family, while foreign relations and military power was centralized behind the king. In a process lasting approximately 200 to 300 years, Baekje, Shilla, and Goguryeo gradually took over their confederacies and centralized power behind a single monarch. In contrast, the Beohan Confederacy did not form a single kingdom, but reorganized their 12 small states over time into the 6 slightly larger states of the Kaya Confederation. As Han China succumbed to internal rebellion, civil war, and decline, Goguryeo took advantage of this by taking territory from them and occasionally raiding further into China, initiating a series of wars where they had the upper hand and then lost it. Their capital city was burnt to the ground. They regrouped and ended the Chinese military presence that had existed in the Liaodong and Korean peninsula for over 400 years. Goguryeo then expanded southwards, and they were well on their way to becoming the only power in the peninsula. When the Xianbei, ancestors of the later Mongols, invaded, Goguryeo's somewhat recently rebuilt capital was burnt to the ground yet again. Many were slaughtered, and an additional 50,000 men and women were taken away and enslaved. Then Baekje, who had recently finished conquering and consolidating all the members of the Mahan Confederation under its rule, decided it was a great time to invade the north and attack Pyongyang. They sacked the city, which was one of the largest and most wealthy in the peninsula, and killed the king of Goguryeo, who was attempting to defend the city. Despite these significant setbacks, Goguryeo was able to find a silver lining to the situation and exploit it. In the north, the Kingdom of Buyeo and other small states and tribes had been devastated by the Xianbei as well, which allowed Goguryeo to play the role as savior and protector of these devastated peoples, allowing them to effectively unite them all against the Xianbei. In the south, Goguryeo was able to negotiate an alliance with Shilla against Baekje, which was the most densely populated of the Korean kingdoms, and they had made it clear that they believed their dynasty had the legitimate right to rule the entire Korean peninsula. During the reign of Goguryeo's most military-capable monarch, Gwanggaedo, Goguryeo defeated enemies in just about every direction. The north was further consolidated, and any resistance was harshly dealt with. Gwanggaedo conquered the Baekje capital, located in the same spot as modern-day Seoul, and then a combined invasion force of Baekje, Kaya, and the Japanese Kingdom of Wa, who were attempting to conquer Shilla, were all defeated, and Goguryeo then made its ally Shilla a protectorate or vassal state. The Xianbei state of the later Yan believed Gwanggaedo was too tied up in the south to effectively defend the north and invaded. They were severely mistaken. Gwanggaeto returned, defeated them, and invaded the later Yan and took most of their territory. The remainder of his reign was spent bouncing between north and south. He repelled a major invasion from the kingdom of Hua, and then campaigned far in the north, conquering territory in what is now China, Russia, and Inner Mongolia, the Xianbei heartland, where he built fortified military outposts to keep the nomads in line. During Gwanggaeto's reign, he conquered 64 walled cities and over 1,400 towns and villages. In one of his campaigns, he claims to have destroyed 3 tribes of the nomadic Khitan, which consisted of 500 to 600 encampments. Gwanggaeto bestowed upon himself a title equivalent to the Emperor of China. His eventful reign was relatively short, especially when compared to that of his son Jiangsu, who succeeded him, and reigned for 79 years, till the age of 98, making him the longest reigning monarch in East Asian history. At this point, Shilla regretted the alliance it had made with Goguryeo, so it switched sides and formed an alliance with Baekje to drive Goguryeo out of the Korean peninsula, which didn't work at all, and both states lost territory. In 475, Baekje was defeated and their king was captured and executed by Goguryeo. And with 90% of the peninsula taken, it seemed it would only be a short matter of time before all of it was united by them. In 427, Jiangsu had moved the capital to Pyongyang. The large city grew much larger and became the center of Goguryeu's golden age of economic prosperity and cultural development. However, after Jiangsu's long reign, all of this wealth became the motivation for internal infighting. Brother murdered brother, and all the aristocratic factions began competing with each other over prestige and revenue streams. This allowed Baekje and Shilla to thrive and grow in power and influence in the south. During this time, the Kaya Confederation had been weakened by attacks from Baekje. Shilla bided their time, and then attacked to the weakened state, taking their capital in 532, and by 562, they had conquered the whole territory. Baekje and Shilla's over century-long alliance came to a sudden end when Shilla unexpectedly attacked Baekje and took some of its territory. Their king unsuccessfully counterattacked with an army of 30,000 men and was killed in battle. Meanwhile, Goguryeo managed to put their internal infighting and factionalism behind them and internally united again. Sui dynasty China, perhaps not realizing this, decided it was a great time to attack and invaded with a massive army, and embarked on several costly and disastrous campaigns, most notably at the Battle of Salsu River, which had been dammed up, drastically decreasing the water level. As the army was halfway through the shallow river, the dam was broken and thousands drowned. Goguryeu's army then moved in to finish off the disorganized and shocked survivors. The Sui lost as many as 300,000 men in the battle, which greatly deteriorated their prestige. They were plagued by internal rebellion, and the Sui emperor was assassinated, and were replaced by the Tang dynasty. Goguryeo then built a 300-mile wall to deter any future invasions, which it did not. A little over a decade after the wall was built, the Chinese invaded by land and sea. This invasion was repulsed. The Tang dynasty then took a different approach. Goguryeo and Baekje had formed an alliance against Shilla, so the Tang made an alliance with Shilla against Baekje. A force of 120,000 men was sent by sea to aid in the conquest of Baekje, who unsuccessfully appealed to the Japanese for help. Baekje was conquered and their last king was taken back to China as a hostage. Goguryeo was then attacked on multiple fronts, and their capital was conquered in 668, ending their state. The Chinese withdrew and the peninsula was unified under Shilla. Before I continue with the aftermath and the rebirth of the later Three Kingdoms period of Korea, Shilla, or the period of unified Shilla, was initially a very peaceful period, where good relations were maintained with Tang China, and no foreign invasions occurred for 200 years. The economy prospered, and Shilla became the hub of foreign trade routes, stretching as far as the Middle East. Shilla attempted to assimilate the populations of the other kingdoms in a program called the Unification of the Great Three. But over time there was a great level of resistance to this, and rebellions became more frequent, culminating in the emergence of two rebel kingdoms, that took the names Koryo and Baekje in homage of the earlier states. This short and chaotic period ended with Koryo reunifying the peninsula into a single state. Koryo is the source for the modern exonym of Korea.